Roger, thanks for dropping by. Sunday chat today. Report on the show yesterday. A report on my, I was going to say night's sleep, but bearing in mind I hardly got any. We'll have a talk about that and why. Strange how coincidences happen. I'll do that first. Chatting to somebody yesterday, just sitting down waiting for our food, and some people were getting quite ratty because they seemed to have been waiting a while. I went up to see where mine was because I had a gap. I got there early, had to set up the sound system and things like that, but then I wasn't actually due to do anything for a while, and setting up the whole place, you know, ready for the public to come in, it's a bustle. And bodies that are hanging around not doing anything are in the way. So I was one of those, so I got out of it. And basically I had to go back in once the judging started to take the photos for our magazine, but there was a gap in between. So I went outside and I had a look at what they had to eat out there, got myself a coffee and ordered something to eat. And it was actually a reasonably sized sausage roll, which I asked about. I said, can I have that hot? I said, yes, certainly, sir. I said, are you going to put it in the microwave? He said, oh, no, we actually warm them up in an oven properly so that they, you know, the pastry stays nice. All right, I'll have one of them then. And I waited, and I thought, well, as several people are getting ratty, I'll go up and ask, because I've been chatting to the manager anyway about car parking and other stuff going on, trying to keep him happy. And I said, is there a problem with the food or something or other? He said, yeah, we've had an accident. And I said, oh, sorry to hear that. What's it? Somebody scolded himself or something like that? He said, no, far worse. One of the young waitresses, the coffee grinder, had a bean jammed in it, and she put her finger in there to move the bean, and it started, and she's taken the top of her finger off. So we've had to rush her off to hospital. So anyway, that explained why there was a bit of a delay. There was a bit of a flap, you know, cleaning up and things. Anyway, so that's what I had to eat. This is important. Relates to later on. And then after I'd done all my photos and everything, the public come in sort of 12 o'clock, and most of those, if they wanted anything to eat, came earlier and had that before the show opened. So there's always a bit of a gap in the cafeteria at 12 o'clock when the doors open. So, and that happened at 1 o'clock this morning. It's not funny. Anyway, so I went in to have something a bit more substantial to eat, and I ended up having a look through the list, and they had a proper cooked breakfast. Oh, that's a bit heavy. I'll just have scrambled egg on toast, which I like a lot. Scrambled egg on toast. So we now skip to, got home, totally shattered. I didn't actually want anything to eat. I was just so tired. So basically I had a quick look round on the computer at mail and stuff like that. And I had an early night. And then I had to get up and go to the loo, like it was just after midnight. And then I just got back to sleep, and we had the dog saga, so that woke me up again. And I ended up having an upset tum all night long. And that goes back to the conversation I was having with my friend while I was eating my sausage roll, because I remembered her being gluten-free on the coach trip. So when we went to Burnham, she had something separate. And I said to her, how did you sort of find out about that? I said, because I'm supposed to be gluten-free now, but as you can see, I'm not strict. And she said, well, I've been doing it 12 years now, and if I slip up, if it's a very, very small amount, I get away with it. But if something sneaks in now, she said, I get a reaction quite quickly, because my body's got so acclimatized to not having any gluten at all, it reacts quite hard. Now we come back to sausage roll, pastry, yeah, toast, ordinary bread, yeah, upset tum all night long. I've been thinking back, I've had no gluten for over a fortnight of any sort. And going back that far, that was just a small piece of cake. Yeah? So it's getting to me now in as much as my body is acclimatised to not having any, so when I do, it upsets my tongue. So I'll have to watch it, won't I, and be a bit more careful, which is a nuisance. But so be it, you know. So that's that. So going back to the show itself, we did something different, which I explained, which was actually to put the display plants in amongst the competitive plants, which we don't normally do. They're normally separate. But that seemed to work because the tables looked really full. You know, it looked a good display. And it was only on closer inspection that you could see some plants had they had this sticker on them. That's just come out of my Sherry baby. They did that, yeah? So so the plants that weren't to be judged were blatantly obvious, you know, because they had, that's the only green on the label, so they stuck out. So that was that. And it worked quite well. I got all my photos done. I've had a quick look at them. Most of them are sharp and in focus. In a hall like that, they have all the curtains drawn and the lights on, and the lights are not what you'd call bright. Yeah. So when you're taking the photos, it's like taking photos in a coal hole or a cellar. It's just not much light around. So I have to be ultra careful to make sure I really hold the camera still. And on the way there, getting the stuff from in here to the car, somebody whacked their elbow really hard on the front door handle, and that's gone quite stiff now. And when you're holding a DSLR, yeah, my hand comes up to there now. Any further and it hurts my elbow. So when you're holding a DSLR to keep it steady, when your hand doesn't quite come up like that, a lot of my photos have got a horizon on the slope. And that really annoys me. You get people take a lovely picture of the sunset on the beach, you know, so you've got the sea and the sun going down and the horizon's like that. It's straight, cuff. Anyway, I'm guilty of it now because my hand didn't work properly. As long as my arm stays low down and slightly bent, I'm okay. If I straighten it, it hurts, and if I bend it a lot, it hurts. It'll get better. You know, it's only a bash. It's a bruise, basically. So, right. So that's that. My Miltonia did its thing. Now that's all I've got at the moment. I will actually get a proper certificate and a cup when we have our next meeting, which is end of October. So I'll have a bit of silverware to come for that. So that did well. At the meeting, that got first in the open class. And since then, it's dropped 6 blooms, and it's still got a first at the show. Trouble is, you can't come any higher up than first. You know, I was thinking if it had all its blooms, it might have done better. If it had all of its blooms, it might have actually got best hybrid in show, because that's the only thing above that, really. Now tomorrow you will get the video with some music of my video of the competition tables. Yeah, watch out as you go round. I did a quick video yesterday to say that we would talk about this today, and well spotted the person who said, is that the golden Rialto? Well, it is, but it's not mine. Yeah, that belongs to my friend who often makes comments about my Oncidium types. He was the one that mentioned they were getting too much light, the leaves were getting a bit pale. And he grows those sort of plants very well. So like I always say, when somebody grows something well and they talk to you about it, listen. And we're going to have to change out here. I'm going to have to stop being lazy. That's a bit of an admission, but I am. And I'll tell you where I'm lazy. This is where we get onto the Oncidiums. But first of all, as you watch that video, which will be posted tomorrow, you'll get to where the golden Rialto is, yeah? And the 2 orchids that have been filmed before, that's what my friend put in as a set of 3. One of the classes is group of 3 orchids. Well, they have several classes of 3, but that was one of them. That was his 3 plants, 3 absolute smashers. And he came up and he went, "Golden Rialto?" I said, "Yeah." No. I said, "Well, no, not really. Golden Rialto in bloom. That's the last thing mine's going to do at the moment because it's struggling." And he said, "I've had a think about what you've said about how you water and things like that, and I'm pretty confident I know what's wrong, and I know why some of your Oncidiums don't do too well." So I said, "Come on then, let's have it." He said, "You've got to stop feeding them." He said, you've got to start doing what you tell other people to do. Because you've always said, when in active growth, feed and water well. When they're not, don't. And that's what I'm doing wrong. I'm feeding when things aren't growing. And when you've got things with perhaps a little bit more sensitivity in the root region, which is not Cattleyas, not many Dendrobiums, but the Oncidiums, some have. Especially if you go to the Odontoglossum types and into generics with a good percentage of those. Anything that's got Cochleoda in. Miltoniopsis, very sensitive roots. Said if you're feeding those plants when they're not growing, they're not using the food up, all you're doing is building up salts in the pot and you're killing the roots. And without the roots, they don't grow. And then you carry on feeding them. So it's blatantly obvious. I need, when I water, you know my cycles, I water my mounts. And then I water my holy clay pots on a separate schedule. Well, that's virtually all Cattleyas. And then I water my cooler, shadier types. That's Restrepias, Masdevallias, Miltoniopsis. They get a separate watering schedule. And they don't get much food at all. So I don't think we need to worry too much about them. And then there's my ordinary pots, everything else that's in a normal pot. And if I'm doing a feeding run, they all get it. Now that's the bit that's got to stop. And I will have to do it. I will have to, when I go around and do my normal pots, I'm going to have to, if it's a feeding run, yeah, then I need separate clean water. So that when I come to a plant that's not actually growing, it doesn't get any food, it gets a flush. Yeah, and then put that one back, get the next one out. Is this one actively growing? Yes, right, you can have some food then. Yeah, I mean there will be times when they all get a flush. Yeah, but I've got to stop putting food in pots when plants aren't growing. And that will become far more important as we head into winter, when a lot of those plants are naturally going to slow down anyway. Yeah? I mean, I cut my feed down quite a lot in the winter. With those short days like that, it's like I said before, as fast as the plants sort of yawn and stretch and wake up and think about, well, bit of light, perhaps we'll start to grow. It's starting to get dark again because the days are so short. So they don't grow much in the winter. So they don't need much food. Now, in the winter, they don't get much food. That's probably okay. But it's this time of year where I suspect the damage is being done, because there are quite a few plants around that are not actually growing. They're maturing growths, perhaps. Well, as long as they haven't matured them yet, they're still growing. What about they've matured their growths and stopped, and there's going to be a delay between the spikes coming out? They're not growing. Yeah. As the spikes start to push out, oh, now they're growing again. They're growing something. Yeah. Even a new burst of root growth is growing something, but the most important time to get decent food in relative to the plant itself is at the time the growths are growing, because that's when it's using most of its energy. And depending on the plant, it will also use a lot of energy producing those spikes and those buds swelling up and getting those blooms to open. Yeah, so I've got to stop doing it. And when you get sort of advice like that, I mean, it's my own advice. I've said it enough blinking times to the viewers, and I don't do it myself. As I say, do as I say, not as I do. But I've got to start doing as I say and actually do it myself. And it isn't too much of a big deal, quite honestly. The only big deal is my method will need to change, because when I've got feed on the go, I mix it up in there, just inside the door. So it's on the end of the dining room table, basically. And I mix it up in there, and when I want some out here, I just get my glass, get another glassful out here, so that I'm sort of reusing water but not in large volumes. So, you know, I'll use up a glassful in 3 or 4 pots, and then I'll need some more because I'll have run out. Yeah? So I am sharing water, but I mean, in the old days I used to mix up the whole lot and start using it from there in the same container. So once you get about 20 pots in, you know, you've got run through occurring and your TDS is starting to go up. You know, because you're going to get to the end of all of the pots before you've used it all. I don't do that, but I used to. So we need 2 lots on the go. So when I've got food on the go, I'm going to need a 3rd container, basically. Because when I'm doing a flush, this bowl out here is all I use. Because I've got my containers, so I just pour the water straight in there, use it until that bit's gone, pour some more in. So for those that aren't getting fed, that's what I'll do. But for those that are getting fed, the feed's in there, but I need another container where I can put a smaller amount in, feed a few pots, and then go and get some more. So I need a 3rd container, which I will have to sort out. But I will have to sort it out. Not just talk about it, do it. I mean, I'm not too bad on the light nowadays. Most of the orchids have got the right colour leaves. There are a few that are still a bit pale, but they haven't really greened up from when they went pale last year, because they haven't grown much since then. But yeah, I'm not too bad on colour. And as we get out of the heat, which is, you know, that's now really, we're starting to get cooler nights, definitely, and we're getting much shorter days. So the light that we get is for less time, so it's less intense overall. And it won't be too long, and a layer of shade netting will have to come off, on one side, not both. The big tree over there, another week, and the sun will be going behind it, which is like early afternoon. And then by the time it comes out the other end and hits the grow room again, it's quite low in the sky down there. So this side gets a lot of late afternoon, really bright light. So I wouldn't take a layer of shade netting off there just yet. But at some point, all I do is look at my notes and see when I took it off last year. But it is weather dependent. If we're having a long period of bright sunny days, then it can stay on. You know, it's not hurting. It only takes 5 minutes to take it off. It's only a few pins. So anyway, so that's the Oncidium types, and quite honestly, that logic applies to a lot of other things. I mean, the Dendrobiums get dealt with, don't they? Because I mean, there's an awful lot of the Dendrobiums that your basic instructions on the internet and in the old runes and scrolls and all that sort of stuff, drier in winter. So, you know, why are they drier in winter? Because they're not growing. If they're not growing, they don't get fed. So I'm okay with the Dendrobiums. It's just the Oncidium types that are catching me out. Because if you look at the potted orchids and take the Dendrobiums away from that group, most of what's left is Oncidium types. So, you know, they're the ones that are suffering from my, well, as I said, it's out and out laziness. And it can't be bothered to have 2 lots of water on the go. So they either all get fed or they all get flushed. And it's got to stop. And I mean, I've been feeding quite a bit lower this year than I normally do anyway. And I've been feeding less often. I mean, last year it was like 3 feeds and a flush. Well, this year it's 2 feeds and sometimes it's 2 flushes. Or it's a feed and a flush and a feed and a flush. So they're getting less food in TDS level at the time of feeding, and they're not getting fed as often. So, you know, I've got my feed levels down quite low now. Which there's nothing showing signs of not having enough food, if you know what I mean. But I need to just adjust the fact that when they're actively growing, because Oncidium new growths push up at a fair old flipping rate, don't they? I've got one handy, there's one up there that's doing its thing. Oh, I can't can't remember what this is. Actually, this is a brassica type. But you know, when they're doing that, yeah, that takes energy. It's trying to turn that into that, or better. You know, I mean, this is a sort of a division from a plant that was failing, so I managed to rescue it. And I mean, every new growth it's put on since I mounted it has tried to bloom, and I've stopped it because I want to get some strength in the plant before I let it bloom. It drains the plants, so get the strength there first. The blooms will come later. If you let a weak plant bloom, you just as likely kill it. You know, it'll go downhill fast and might not recover. You just knock all the strength out of them. And especially with some of the Oncidiums pushing up 2 spikes per bulb, you know, you got to go steady. So, got this funny one over here, which we don't know what it is. This came from Jeff's. And it does have a spike now. It is pushing a spike up, so we might have a clue what the hell that is. Now, that's got dark green leaves. I'd say bordering on too dark, that one, but that gets the same light as the others. It's up on the it's up on that back wall with my twinkles at the moment. So those are dark leaves for an Oncidium type, a little darker than most, but nonetheless it's pushed up quite a few good new growths, and we've now got a spike. And there's more than enough new growths and roots on that plant to let that one spike grow. Because there are other new growths that aren't spiking to keep the strength of the plant up, because it's all joined up. So, yeah, you just go. As I said, I've been lazy, and there are consequences. It's funny again. Somebody put a Reg Nellii in the competition tables. It's nowhere near as good as mine. And I was talking to my friend Alan, and he said, "You've got to stop doing it, Roger. You say this every show. You come up to me and say, I've got a much better one than that at home. Bring it." But there is a hassle factor, you know. I mean, it's getting them all, make sure they're ready to go to the show. You know, any manky leaves trimmed or taken off completely. You know, make sure they're in a nice clean black pot, dress the top. All this stuff takes time. And, you know, I don't know, it needs doing. If you're going to take part in an orchid society, you should actually join in, you know, and do as much as you can to help out where you can. And when a show comes up and it's open to the public, lots of plants, you know, then the public go away and they might think about joining the society because it sparks their interest, which is part of the objective. We got 7 new members at yesterday's show. I think that is an all-time record by a bit. We usually pick up a couple of new members at a show, but 7 in one go is something. And it should have been more than that, but 2 people couldn't come. Last minute sort of thing. And we had idiots yesterday. Lots of idiots. Lots of half-wits. Lots of ne'er-do-wells. Where did they come from? The media generated them. Because BP, which around the rest of the world, that's one of the larger petrol and oil companies, BP, probably heard of them, but they've got garages around the country. And some of them, a few of them, were getting a bit short on fuel. And part of the reason was because we're very short on HGV drivers in this country, because after Brexit, a lot of the European ones decided they'll go home then. Because a lot of their work was to and from Europe to the UK. Well, with Brexit, they thought, we'll blow it, we'll just stay in Europe, we won't bother. So we lost a lot of our HGV drivers. Plus, there's a lot getting old and retiring. So we're short on drivers, and there was a few garages having a bit of problems with deliveries. And then the Esso garages, some of those have an association with Tesco's, the supermarket where I get my shopping. So the smaller Tesco's and some of the bigger ones might have an Esso garage attached. yeah? But the big Tesco stores have their own petrol, and it's quite a bit cheaper than others. So anyway, and I think it was less than a handful in the whole of the UK of Tesco garages were waiting on the delivery, and the media reported it. My local garage up here had a queue yesterday morning when I set off, right back up, totally blocking the main road, possibly back as far as the hospital, which is starting to get dodgy, yeah, with ambulances and stuff, yeah. It was so bad, drivers that didn't want to join that queue were going on the wrong side of the road onto the sidewalk, the pavement, to get past the queue, so that they, you know, the traffic could still come down the other way. And one guy nearly didn't get his plants registered because he got stuck in areas where roads were effectively blocked by the idiots and the half-wits panicking to get their fuel. Because the media had reported there was a little bitty tiny bit of a problem. And despite the government saying there is no shortage, a few garages might have to wait a day or two for a delivery. But if that one's waiting for a delivery, that one's probably okay, just up the road. Everybody panicked, and it happens all the time. These people are half-wits. They have no ability to think things through. Nothing. I mean, I got 3/4 of a tank, and the show's 7 miles from here, so I certainly didn't need to panic, and I wouldn't anyway. You know, they've said the petrol will get round to those few garages that are a bit short. Well, if people would just listen. I mean, I suppose, you know, if you had, if your job depended on travel, and early Monday morning you've got to set off and do quite a long journey as part of your job, you want to make sure you've got your fuel before Monday morning, don't you? So you get it sorted out this weekend. And if you normally do that Saturday morning and then there's a great big queue coming out of the petrol station, well, you join it, don't you? Because you can't miss your work on Monday. I just found it comical and sad at the same time, that half the country was jamming up all the garages, and you know what that actually did? It caused a shortage. Now, okay, it's the half-wits that join in with it, but it isn't really. Who started it? The media started that, scratching in the dirt, trying to find a story when there really wasn't one there, was there? You blindly follow. Well, this one doesn't. Anyway, got another show in 2 weeks' time, which is Wessex, so that'll be Lynn will be in charge, and we'll get that one done. Hannah's coming with me to that one, so I've got to go and get her and then go across there. It's like a big triangle up to get Hannah across there to the show and then home afterwards. Get that done 2 weeks' time, that is. And tomorrow, Monday, I've got a talk to do in the evening, and it's to non-orchid people, so it's a horticultural society. And it's a talk I prepared and I've done quite a few times, you know, over a period of time. And the last time I did that talk, I remember saying, I don't like this talk anymore, I'm going to redo it. Well, I got it out, and there was a YouTube version of that with the talking on. Obviously, the one that I'm going to do tomorrow night will be silent, and I'll do the talking. And what it was, why I didn't like it last time I did it, is I hadn't rehearsed. And like, you know, there's bits where there's a bit of text comes up on the screen, and I talk alongside it. Well, you need to know roughly what you're going to say to know when that text ends and it changes to the next piece. And I was running out, you know, I was sort of getting to the point where I finished what I thought I was supposed to say, and the screen, the video hadn't moved on. It was still sat there on the same words, and I was having to try to think of something else. So it didn't work because it was my fault. I hadn't rehearsed it properly. So I had a look through that yesterday. It's perfectly adequate for what I've got to do, especially for what they're paying. It doesn't really warrant my time to completely redo that talk, quite honestly. All I've got to do, which I hadn't thought of, I must admit, which I have now, if I bring that video back into my video editor, I can cut the end of it off, because the end of it is actually advertising the Two Orchid Society shows coming up. Well, they're not now. It actually advertised our 60th anniversary show at the Highcliffe Castle. So it's that long ago I did this talk. But it's perfectly adequate if I can just remove that ending, which I think I can do okay. And then we'll have a go at that. And I'll be using my new projector for the first time, which I got for emergencies and for places like this. Where I'm going, they've got a big pull-down screen, but they haven't got a projector. You know, it's a gardening club that hire a hall to meet. So they're dependent on what the hall's got. And they don't own a projector between them. So I did get one, you know, that I've got for myself now. So we'll try that out, connect that up to the laptop and project it up. Don't need sound, obviously. So anyway, that's tomorrow evening. So I'll have a couple of dry runs and make sure I've got my words sorted out. And I think if my words run alongside the video smoothly, it's a perfectly adequate talk. And I've got loads of plants to take this time. I borrowed a phalaenopsis. Talk about people trying to be helpful and mucking stuff up. It's not directly their fault. But we have a repotting service at the show, so people bring their plant in. And you know, they have different types of bark and various pots and this, and they have a Bible on the end, so they can read the last rites to some of the plants because they ain't going to make it. You know, they bring in, like, you know, a phalaenopsis with one yellow leaf and rotten roots. You know, so you just read the last rites and put it in the bin. You're not going to save it. But the chairman, I always ask to borrow some plants from him if I'm doing a talk, because he lives just up the road, and between him and his other half, they've always got phalaenopsis in bloom, which is what I need for this sort of talk. It's the sort of, I need the sort of plants they see in the supermarket and stuff. So anyway, I said, have you got one that I can repot? He said, yeah, I have actually. There's one hasn't been done. So he brought that in, and the one in flower that he's lent me, he actually ended up putting on the table as a non-competitive one, because he hadn't had it as long as he should have done. But the other one just got put to the side, just out the way. And the guys doing the repotting kept looking at it and thinking, well, somebody must have left that for us to repot, and they're coming back later. So they repotted it, didn't they? And I haven't got anything suitable to repot. All mine have been done. So they won't have old tired roots to trim off, you know, part of a demo. But when Mike came up, he was so apologetic. Well, he didn't know that's what it had been left to one side for. For me, would have been better put somewhere else, really. But I didn't have anything to do with the putting of it. All I got was told that there were 2 plants for me. Don't forget them when you go home. So anyway, Mike came, I'm ever so sorry. But he said, I haven't really repotted it properly. All we really did was take it out of the pot and give it a shake and pot it on. Yeah, because it was in a tiny little pot. We put it in a bigger pot and put some bark around it. So if you tip it out of the pot again, you should have the old part of the plant. So I'll have to do that. I'll have to take that out so that I know what I'm getting into tomorrow evening. You know, so, you know, again, I've got the plants. You know, I'll take virtually everything in here that's in flower, so I've got a nice assortment. That's all got to be packed up in a box, got out into the car. You know, it all takes time. And for, quite honestly, for a mere pittance. If I worked the amount I'm charging, if I worked out the hourly rate from when I start packing plants up to when I get everything back in place, and the drive time and the actual time I'll spend there, because although this is the talk, it's not the whole evening. They'll be doing some of their own stuff as well, but I need to be there. If you add all that up together, I'll probably be getting about £3 an hour or something stupid. But it all goes down to experience. So yeah, that's for tomorrow. I've got another one that's booked in for January, which I'm not worrying about. And the other one that, it was one of those, you know, pointed stick jobbies. And you said you'd have a talk ready for emergencies. And I'm sort of going, yeah, I did say that, didn't I? Blast. So I've got another talk to get ready that I need on a memory stick or something, so that if we get to a meeting and for some reason our speaker doesn't turn up, we've got something that we can just run with. So yeah, I've got that to do. And that one is also a booked talk, that's for Wessex, I believe. later in the year. April, actually it's next year, I think it's April or something. And I'm going to do Dendrobiums through the seasons. Now you often get that on YouTube in bits, you know, like preparing to take your Dendrobiums into winter, you know, firing them up again as they come back into life as we come out of winter, you know, growing season, feed and water well. But to join all that together in their sets, you know, so, you know, you've got the nobile types, you've got the phalaenopsis types, black hair types and Latoria types, they can go in together, and others, winter resters specifically, some of those are in different, so the Dendrobiums are split up into sections, which is handy, but culture-wise, it's not the Bible. Just because a Dendrobium is in that section, there will be general guidance of how those orchids need to be looked after, but there'll be exceptions. You know, like you say, these orchids are intermediate. There'll be some cool growers in there, and there might even be some that like to be a bit warmer. There'll be high light, there'll be low light. They're not all the same, and you know, even though they're in the same section. But yeah, so we'll put that one together. Obviously, that'll be a video presentation, and I've got to start keeping clips. I need to get another external hard drive, because I'm not mecking about with the cloud storage and stuff like that. Because quite honestly, you don't get much. When you want more, like when you're talking about videos, it starts costing money. And I thought, well, if it's going to cost money, I'd rather have the thing in my hand, quite honestly, and away from everybody else's control. So I'll get myself a decent hard drive, and I need to start storing clips. Got photos, you know, everything that's ever been bloomed. I've got a nice picture of the blooms. Well, in a talk, that's all very well, but it'd be much nicer to have a picture of the whole plant, or better still, a little video clip that moves around the plant and then perhaps zooms in on the blooms. I need to start collecting those clips, because obviously with my Dendrobiums, well, and other stuff, you know, they bloom at different times of year. And in a talk like Dendrobiums through the seasons, it would be handy to have those shots as I'm talking about spring and as I'm talking about autumn. You see what I mean? That could make a pretty impressive talk when that's all put together. Could take that one on the road. Anyway, that's for the future. So that's stuff coming up. As far as enjoyment value yesterday is concerned, very enjoyable, apart from the fact that I got to the point where if I stand still for any length of time, my back starts to hurt. It's the only problem left from the back saga that we used to have. You know, I had to start moving everything off the bottom shelves because I couldn't get down there. And if I managed to get down there, I couldn't get up. And what triggered that was the time that I couldn't get up, I put my hand on one of these shelves to help pull myself up and pulled the shelf over. Now, luckily it landed on me, so it didn't go right over and only a few plants fell off. So I managed to push it back up. But that's when we went to the chiropractor and got our back sorted out. But yesterday, the length of time I was on my feet was starting to get my back twingy. Now I know how to stop it. Move. You don't have to tear around. You don't have to do a marathon up the garden path or anything. Just move. Just stroll around. Stop and chat to someone. Stroll around. But it got to the point where I just had to sit down. Of course, and when you sit down, you seize up. I'm sort of stuck in the chair now, in the children's department. I even did the kiddies quiz. Because I thought, I'm stuck here now in this seat. You know, I'm going to stay here as long as I can. But yeah, the children's area, we only had one, which is unusual. We only had one kiddie. And that was our member, our youngest member, little Izzy. She was there all day. But, you know, she coloured stuff in. And what we do is we have... for the kiddies sort of thing, pictures of types of orchids and a map of the world, and they have to try and guess what part of the world this orchid comes from, and you know, then they go and check their answers round the back and all that sort of stuff. So there's lots of little things for them to do, and they make orchids. That's great fun, that is. They got some different shaped sepals, like cut out on paper, different shaped pairs of petals and different shaped lips, and you pick one from each pile and make your own orchid and stick them together and colour them in. You know, so they love that. So I did some of that because I've pinched the seat now. I'm in the kiddies area, but I wasn't exactly using up somebody else's seat really. But, and it was a good day. Got to speak to an awful lot of people that I haven't seen for a while. Some people who watch the YouTube channel came up and said hello. That's always nice. Not many, but you know, it is a local show. It's not like a national show or anything. Yeah, I'd class it as a good day. But by the time we got to the end, I really had enough. It's a long day. I mean, I set off from here at 7:30 and I got back at 5:30. And I'd been doing something most of the time. Obviously I sat down and had something to eat and had a chat, that sort of thing. And I had my sit down earlier on while I was waiting to do the photos. But apart from that, I was on my feet most of the day until I actually set. You know, actually sat down in the kiddies area and just sat solid then. And I had to put my hand on the table to get out the seat. And then I thought, right, that's it. We can't sit down again until we go and get in the car. And then hope that when I get home I can get out of the car, you know. But yeah, there's no back issue this morning. It's gone. It was just the way it was being a little abused yesterday. So it's all gone now. We just got the problem with this elbow, which is, you know, even that's easing up as the day goes on. And the tummy trouble's better now because the gluten's gone. That passed through, as they say, with a vengeance. So, stuff. I deliberately haven't put this away so you can see this, because the fact that it missed a year, newer people won't have seen this. This is my big Vanda. And we were talking about these types of Vandas that have got cerulea in there. They are large blooms, but they carry on growing. If I measured that, that's this one's just opening. They will open staggered down the length there. What we've got, 2, 4, 6, 8, 9. I think there's going to be 10. And it will carry on extending. The actual spike will get long. If you look at the gap between where the buds are, well, it's got to do that. So it's probably going to come out to about here. And then the blooms are nice and separate down each side. But if you put a measure across those two, whatever they are, where are we? I'm looking at the back here. Those two petals, because they're horizontal, and measured them just after it's opened and came back 2 weeks later, it'll be bigger. The blooms grow. So even though these blooms are quite large, they haven't finished, they will be bigger than that. So it's doing well, this plant. If all of those blooms have been open, apart from Nick Fry's cerulea, you saw that in the video clip of the orchid displays at Burnham's, the Devon Orchid Society. Lovely cerulea Vanda with a pair of perfectly matched spikes, one coming out each side. It's gorgeous, that plant. Well, it still was gorgeous for our show, so that stole the show, as they say. But this would have been a close second if all of the blooms had been opened, because it's a pretty good plant. Leaves are quite good, very good root system. So as a Vanda, it's not bad. But as a Vanda, it can go up out the way now. Trouble is, when you've got a long spike like that and it's hanging around, it's very easy to just like turn round and knock it, and then you knock the buds off, or worse still, snap the spike. So that can go back up there now. We haven't got anything else opened up. I didn't take my little Orangus for a very good reason. I remembered once I had Fastuosa, it was in bloom, and I took it to the show tables at a meeting and it dumped all its blooms. I lost the lot. There's a change of atmosphere, the journey in the car both ways. It just objected and dumped the blooms. And as this is the first Mr. Sidii blooms I've ever had, I thought, well, you're not going out to play, you'll stay in here where I can enjoy you. Lovely night fragrance on that, but it doesn't start as soon as it gets dark. It needs about an hour or so after total dark. Not twilight sort of thing, and then it comes into its own. It's not strong. Some Orangus have got very strong fragrance. This one's quite mild. Very pleasant. So that's that. We haven't got any new buds opening, we've got spikes. We haven't got anything new opened. And when I go to Wessex, the Tolumnia can go. That didn't quite make the Bournemouth show by 2 weeks, because I'd only owned it 50 weeks, and you need to have owned them for a minimum of a year. But with Wessex, it's 6 months, so that'll be able to go to Wessex. It's going to be a bit of a... See, again, this will need preparing, because the old little seedling fans are starting to die back. Well, they'll all have to come off. That'll all have to be trimmed and tidied up. And then you've got the presentation. The way these blooms have opened, they look best from the front there at that angle. Well, half the plant's hanging downwards. So it's not going to be that easy to present this so that the judges are looking at the blooms. See, if I put it in a pot so that the plant looks nice, then these are going to waggle around all and turn upside down. So you're now looking at the back of all the blooms, which is no good at all, is it? So that'll take a little bit of getting ready, that one. And it needs a little bit more green moss on. And one of the bits of fishing lines actually snapped as well. So it'll need redressing, that one. So again, it's all time, it's all preparation, but needs to be done. And we ended up not doing the hippie soap. Hippie soap didn't get done, but it will do. Unfortunately, we're in for, looking at the weather forecast for the week, we're switching to changeable autumn weather now. So you know, we're going to get some rain about flipping time. You know, some duller weather with a bright spell now and again, which is not ideal for doing that soap treatment, because the plants get absolutely soaking wet. And they need to dry off. We are starting to get cooler nights now. But, you know, it needs to be done, and needs to be done twice for plants that are known to have scale, which is the Cattleyas. They've all been done once. Some of them have been done twice, because we did a little experiment with the first lot of hippie soap and chose some plants to, one, make sure it, pardon me, actually did some good, didn't waste all my time and energy, so that seems to have worked, but also to make sure there was no harm to the plants. It didn't actually degrade the plants. Now don't forget, I did actually rinse mine off, you know, they got absolutely drowned with the stuff, left to soak in it for a while, doing their job, killing stuff, and then it got washed off. So you know, it takes time, it all takes time. So right, so that is a strong tip for, again, going back to that video, to that little bit with the golden Rialto, for somebody who grows and blooms the odont types like that. When they speak, I listen. So we will, from now, literally, the pots will get watered probably Tuesday next week. They haven't long been done, and we will start getting to the time of year where some pots will get picked up. Nope, you're still wet. You go back. You don't water if it's still wet. But we then need to make the decision at pot level, are you growing? Yes or no? Because don't forget, some Oncidiums will be growing through the winter, or trying to. Well, they need a little bit of help, even though it's slowed down a bit. That one I showed earlier, that Brassia, that's probably got some time to go before that growth is mature. So that needs continuing to be fed. And some of the others, the twinkles, are going to start producing their spikes soon, so they're going to need some energy to push those on, get some decent numbers of blooms. The Miltonias tend to have done their thing now, the biggies up here, all three of those. They'll finish blooming in weeks to come, and some of them have even started their new growths already, so they won't have a gap. You know, they're already starting to produce the next set of new growths. Some of the Brassias, the bigger Brassias, they're starting their next set of growths already. And they'll push those on slowly but surely through the winter to bloom earlier next year. So, yeah, down at pot level, is this plant growing? Yes, and it's a feed run, feed it. No, just water. Yeah. And as a consequence, we should stop. Okay, I flush relatively frequently, but I don't flush properly. If you want to flush a plant properly, you've got to pour a lot of water through it and get it absolutely soaking wet. So you're using quite a large volume of water. It needs to be clean water as well. Not water that's run through several other pots as well. It needs to be clean. And to do it properly, you need to go back and do it again not long after. So you get it soaking wet, and then any residual salts dissolve in that moisture, start coming out of the media and becoming diluted. Then you flush it again if you really want to do it properly. Now, some media you don't need to worry about flushing. If you're growing in pebbles, pebbles don't hold any water, so there's no build-up. But anything that can absorb potentially needs a flush. And if your feed levels are low, you don't have to go quite so mad with the flushing. You know, it's just a good run through with some clean water should do the job. Mounts flush very easily because there's very little to store the feed. There's a little bit of moss and some bark, and the bark is a hard surface basically, so you pour water over that, it's pretty clean straight away. So and some fertilizers, I mean there is a certain fertilizer made in the EU that's it's good stuff, it's highly recommended, but they say there is no need to flush. Well, I disagree. You choose. It's your choice, your plants, your root systems. But I still go back to the fact that in nature, most of the rain that washes down over these plants is pretty flipping clean, and it hasn't got much food in it. It's almost a flush every time with just that little bit of residual nutrient levels. So if you think about that in the rainy season, those plants are getting fed a little bit every single time it rains, which is every day virtually, sometimes twice a day. They're getting a little bit. So it's very frequent, but very low. And the idea of replacing that in cultivation with lots and lots of nice clean water, followed by a 10-course meal in one go, giant high volume food, it just doesn't appeal to me. It just doesn't seem right, so I don't do it. So there we go then. Changing procedures. See, when I first came out here, before I started talking, my idea was to actually say, well, what we're going to do is we're going to change where everything is so that we've got all the ones that aren't growing together so that I know where they are. And all the ones, and then I thought, hang on, that's going to mess up their light requirements. So that got scrapped straight away. So it will be at individual pot level with some clean water and some feed when it's a feeding run. A bit more fiddly, but his final comment was, well, you're retired, aren't you? What else you got to do? That's absolutely right. It's just me being lazy. So there we go. That's today done. I'll get this posted because for me on a Sunday this is relatively early, but I've got nothing to do out here today. There's no watering to actually do. I'll pick up again tomorrow. So cause I got everything done because I knew I wouldn't be here yesterday. So. And it's been dull. I mean, we actually had some rain yesterday. So well, where the show was. So I doubt if we had any here. It's like a little hole here. The clouds go round and miss out where I live. So, see you next time. And watch that concept of feeding things that aren't growing, even at relatively low levels, and it building up because the plants themselves are not using it. In addition, you've now got nutrients, it's not clean water in your media, which is going to help things that live in media grow and break your media down. So it's not just the plant. If you know, it's going to accelerate the degrading of the media by having all those salts in there because the plant's not using them. And both of those combined together will knock your roots down. So so I'm now going to do as I say. Hopefully you were anyway. And I'll see you next time. Thanks for dropping by.